I'm Bob and I like to make stuff. Today we're going to make version 3 of the paint booth with a lot of storage. If you've been around the channel for a while, you know that I've made two separate versions of a paint booth. One was a small portable one, and then there's this one. And this has been around for a couple of years, and it's gotten a whole lot of use. In that time, I found several things about it that I like, and several things that I don't like. But if you want to find out why I made this one the way that I made it, you can go back and watch that video. In this video, we're actually just going to focus on making some changes and making a new version of this one. The biggest thing that I learned from this is that it's just too tall. I was hoping I would take advantage of the full height of this thing to be able to paint large items, but I just don't do that. I ended up taking large stuff outside. So, to cut down on the overall volume and make the exhaust work better, we're actually just going to make this top section the paint booth. We also need to change out the material. This plastic is not really necessary anymore. It doesn't need to be lightweight, and it's getting covered up with paint, so it's not letting light through. So another thing we're going to do is add some lighting to the inside of it and some fans to help push all of the extra paint toward the exhaust. We're also going to add some area up at top to hang more things, not just on this front edge. And the last big thing is we're going to add a whole bunch of storage down here on the bottom to hold spray paint cans, because I've got a ton of them and I don't have a place to put them. Let's go cut down some 2x4s. We'll get started. I went ahead and made up the two frames for this. These are just 2x4s with pocket holes, super easy, super fast. So now we just need to connect the two frames together with some cross pieces. This will eventually be the top section once we stand it up. And so this whole section is going to get wrapped in this whiteboard material. This stuff is really inexpensive, like 13 bucks for a 4x8 sheet. It's very thin and it's white. So we're going to face this side to the inside of the paint booth, so it'll help bounce light around. And eventually it's going to get covered in paint. We can either replace it or paint it white again. Now that I've got the walls up, I do need to seal them a little bit, so I'm going to add some tape, just duct tape or something, to the back of these to make sure that nothing can blow out of those little gaps. But next, I actually need to put in one more support across here and then lay down a surface, just a piece of plywood that will fit inside all of these 2x4s, and that's going to be my main painting surface. I've got it pretty high, but that allows me to be able to put a turntable on it so that I can spray directly on things, plus I can still hang things from the top. We'll get to that in a little bit. One of the weird things and kind of bad things about making something so tall in this space and something that is this deep is that the diagonal from corner to corner is longer than the room is tall. So if I pull this forward, I actually can't lean it all the way forward and it hits the ceiling. That makes it a little bit more difficult to put together, but you just have to be creative. So to put the top on this, I'm actually going to lay the top on here, lean it as far forward as I can, drive in some brads, and we'll do the same thing on the back side. We've got the basic box built, and next we need to work on how we're going to get the fumes out of here. Last time we had a really big box in the back, and there was a filter from an air conditioning, there were some baffles in front of that, and that was all drawn by a big blower on the back side of this. The blower's still there, but we found that the filters actually got in the way more than anything, and even without those filters in place, liquid paint never made it anywhere close to the blower. So in this case, we're actually gonna try something a little bit different. I think I'm gonna put a hole right here and then put a cover in front of it so that the opening is facing down. That way when you're spraying paint like this, it's gonna hit this wall and probably stop. Then the fumes will be drawn up and through the system. So let me get started on that and you'll see what I'm talking about. This is one of those projects where I'm kind of making it up as I go along, and I realize that I don't have a great way to make this pipe stay in this opening. So I've taken the jigsaw and cut out some of the same diameter little pieces, and I'm gonna pull this pipe through and then drive in some screws through the metal into this little piece of wood. And that's gonna create a collar on the outside that's gonna stop it from being able to fall back in. We'll still have to seal up around it, but this is really just to keep it in place. That actually worked out really well. So next I need to cover this so that there's not air going directly into it. I want the vent, the opening, to be facing down. So I'm gonna put kind of a false wall here in front of it and make it a small opening. When you make a paint booth, there's a lot that you have to think about as far as pressure and velocity of air. This may not be the ideal situation for it, but we're just gonna try something new. Luckily, this is all just kind of screwed together. So if we do need to adjust it over time, I can easily take it apart and come up with something else. All right, so I cut this piece to 9 inches. This is just a funny little accident. And as I was cutting it, I realized that you could just lift it like this within the paint booth, make it set at an angle. And I remembered that I had these scraps of plywood laying in the scrap bin that were triangles. So I went to grab them and thought, oh, these will work, I'll just cut them down to size. And then I held them up to the side of the piece, and they are the perfect size to just be used. So that's awesome. Another cool thing about this is it'll be flipped around. This is the back side, but I can still use 2 more of these to actually cut down the area that's going to allow the volume of air to come through. So I can put these 2 pieces around the inlet on the wall, so it's not trying to suck from the whole thing, just from a small section. Alexa, turn on the exhaust. I added a strip across the middle here, and that's because I need a little bit of a spacer. I'm gonna take this chicken wire or pig wire or whatever you call it, and we're gonna make a grid that runs across. So I'm gonna staple it in on both sides and in the middle, and this will give a grid so that we can hang things from it to paint. I want to make sure that this can hold a decent amount of weight, so I'm gonna staple it in place to get started, and then I'm gonna go back and put in screws to make sure that this won't pull away when you have something heavy hanging. Now that I've got that in there, it's nice and secure, so the next step is to add some lights. I've got some LED strips, and these are just 12 volt daylight LEDs. I'm gonna run these up around the inside facing in. And this will end up getting powered below, and we're gonna add some fans as well, but I'm just gonna use the sticky back that comes on these and stick them in place. Got the LEDs up. Now obviously everything in here is going to get covered with paint eventually, and so you don't want these to get painted over because then they won't be worthwhile having. So my way around that is to take some clear packing tape and just put a layer on top of all of the LEDs. Then over time, as they get covered in paint, I can just peel the tape off and add another layer. LEDs typically don't get warm. I'm going to keep an eye on these just to make sure that they don't get warm enough to make the tape melt or anything. They shouldn't. I've never seen that happen, but it is a consideration just to make sure that they don't get so hot that they affect the tape in a bad way. Now that we've got the LEDs up, the next thing is to add some fans. Now the idea here is that the fans are going to be blowing the air toward the exhaust. So hopefully that will stop any of the fumes or help stop any of the fumes and the spray to come back. We want it all to go toward the exhaust. So I've got these little 12-volt PC fans, which is the same voltage as the LEDs, so they can all be hooked together. So I need to make some sort of a mount to put these here, and I want to make sure that I have some flexibility because I'm honestly not sure the best place to put them. I want to clamp these on so that I can change the angle and I can move them up and down. I'm just going to make some simple wiring to put these to the lights and to a power supply, but I'll do that in a little bit. Now to the thing that I'm actually the most excited about in this entire new paint booth, and that's this section down here, and it's storage. We're going to make some shelves or cabinets, or I'm not really sure what you call this, because they're essentially cabinets on their side. So we're going to put drawer slides on the top and the bottom, and then in between them, kind of a big piece that will pull out and be filled up with paint cans. They're only going to be about 2 cans wide, so they shouldn't be too terribly heavy, too hard to deal with, and you should be able to get to paint from both sides of each one of these. This particular gap is going to allow for 7 of those, so I'm going to have to do a lot of the same stuff, but let's get to making one, and I'll show you how it goes. I've got all these pieces cut down. I'm just kind of laying them out to figure out the height of each one of the shelves on the inside of this thing. But basically, these are all just going to be glued together, and then this is going to be the front face. It's a little bit taller so that it overhangs the outside of the cabinet. And then this whole thing will get put in there with the drawer slides right here and right there. It's really basic. We just have to make 6 of these. So this is it. It's very simple, and I think it's going to do fine. If it needs any kind of shoring up to keep it square, we can always add some gussets in these corners to kind of force the shape. But I think once it's in between the slides on the top and the bottom with the weight on these shelves, it'll probably do just fine. So let's go put this one in and see how it works. I put an 1/8 inch piece of material here on the side so that it has a spacer off of the wall, and I'll use that same spacer in between each one of these to make sure the gap is the same. This is one of the reasons why I said it might be easier to actually make these separately, make the storage thing on its side so that you could put these together like you would a normal drawer, but this is where I'm at, so I'm having to do it the hard way. Now I can already tell kind of a small potential problem. If you pull this all the way out, because these are full extension drawer slides, you do get some flex, and that flex is actually in the bottom drawer slide. But once you have a lot of weight on here with the paint, that may get worse. But I do think that one way around that would be to put a foot off of the bottom here with a caster, and that'll keep this front corner a certain distance from the ground. So worst case scenario, we can add a caster there. I think it'll be okay. After trying this out a little bit, we're gonna switch gears. Instead of putting these on the drawer slides on the bottom, we're gonna keep them attached on the top, but these pieces are gonna sit on top of casters. That way, all of the weight will be carried directly down into the ground and we won't have to worry about it bowing. The casters will allow them to move back and forth, and the guides on the top will keep them in line. Now that we've got these different storage pieces in here on the sliders and on the casters, they're moving nice and smoothly, which is great. But they are really tall and they're not super strong on the inside. So by pulling them out by the top or the bottom, you're gonna end up with some racking. So what we wanna do is actually make a handle that goes on the front that connects to the top and the bottom so that when you pull it out, you're pulling it evenly. To do that, Josh jumped into Fusion 360 and made these little brackets. Now these are gonna go on the face of the drawer and they have a hole right there for a bar, a piece of conduit. So we can put this in, put in a piece of conduit, and then put the other one in at the bottom. Then anywhere you grab on that handle, it's gonna be pulling the drawer from the top and the bottom evenly. One of the cool things about modeling something like this in Fusion 360 is that you can measure things in the real world. You can measure the conduit, you can measure the screws, and then model everything to fit perfectly. The last thing here is to make a way to actually keep the cans in this storage. So we made these shelves so that they're 2 cans deep. You can easily fit 2 cans, but there's nothing to stop them from falling off. So our solution here is some black surgical tubing that's really stretchy. Essentially, I'm gonna staple it here, run it across through 2 holes in the back and then back on the other side. And that's gonna create a flexible barrier on the outside that'll stop the cans from falling out, but you can easily move it out of the way when you wanna get a can. Because this stuff is so stretchy, you actually have to use multiple staples and hook it around so that it won't just pull itself out from behind the staple. There's probably a better way to do this. I've seen other people actually roll this stuff over on itself and it creates friction against 2 pieces of it. So that's something I may try on the next one, but I've got a whole lot of these to do so I can experiment. Now I just have to load up all the paint in these things and then we can try it out. With some bigger painting projects coming up soon, I'm really looking forward to having this larger area and more space to hang bigger things. And I'm really excited about the storage underneath this thing because it will help clean up this entire area. Also, I'm gonna put a link down in the description for the upgraded fan that I added to this exhaust system. I just put it in line and swapped it out with the other one, but you can check it out if you're interested. We've got tons of other types of projects that you may want to check out, and if you're not subscribed, make sure you do that as well. That's it for this one. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. All right, let's start from here. Shh.
It's like a little puppet theater.
I want to be big.
Zoltan.
Zoltar?
Salty.
And that'll actually cut down this the volume